In the second half of this lecture, we're going to learn more about work analysis. Like legal issues, work analysis and job analysis are essential to the work of personnel psychologists. The data we get from these procedures provides the foundation for most HR systems, including recruitment, selection, performance, training, compensation. The data can also be used to help organizations create better products and services and make sure that those products and services meet the customer's demands. By doing this, the organizations can then contribute to their own competitive advantage. Finally, the data from work analysis and job analysis can be used to minimize the likelihood that an employer ends up in a courtroom. The work analysis process is a standardized process. It's a series of steps that we use to gather information about work, specific jobs, and also the relationship between various jobs. Step one is to define the outcomes of a job. These outcomes are often based on the organization's big picture. Think back to the scorecards we talked about in the week 1 lecture. Those scorecards provide the information that we use to define outcomes. In step 2, we define the importance and the frequency of various job tasks that are required to meet the outcomes that are then tied to the big picture. In step 3, we define the employee characteristics that are required in order to do the tasks we define in step 2. And then step 4 is to define the where and how of jobs and of work. Job relatedness is a concept you will become familiar with in this class. Personnel psychologists use this concept all the time to describe recruitment practices, selection practices, job performance practices. These practices must be job related. They must be relevant to the job, relevant to the work. To enhance the validity of the practices, the tools, the techniques that we use to attract, select, and promote employees, we should rely on both the broader process of work analysis, but also on the more specific process of job analysis. There's 2 types of job analysis that we might use. Task-oriented job analysis is focused on the job's tasks, activities, duties, responsibilities, the behaviors of someone in that job. Worker-oriented job analysis is focused on the requirements, the personal requirements of the job, those qualities that employees need to succeed in that particular role. And this includes knowledge, skills, abilities, personality, interests, preferences, experiences. When we conduct a job analysis, we use the information we collect to draft a job description. And you see here on this slide some of the different sections that might be included: the job title, the job summary, information about the organization, a list of tasks and activities, the tools, equipment, technology that a job incumbent might use, the work context, including the schedule, the working conditions, temperature, number of coworkers, number of direct reports, qualifications of the worker, those KSAOs that someone needs in order to do the job. Now, when it comes to the tasks and the KSAOs, it's not enough just to list the job tasks and the qualifications that are required to do the job. We also try to figure out the importance of each of these, and also, when it comes to tasks, the frequency with which an individual performs that task on the job. There are guidelines for creating a job description on page 655 of your textbook. KSAOs. This is an acronym that you also want to become familiar with. It is a common phrase we use in personnel psychology. It stands for knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. Knowledge includes the factual and procedural information that you have learned throughout your life. A skill is defined as a competence, a set of behaviors that you do well again and again across situations. An ability is a competence to perform some observable behavior. We also think about abilities as more permanent behaviors. In many job descriptions, you'll see things like the ability to see, the ability to hear, the ability to walk, the ability to lift heavy items. These abilities are not necessarily things that you learn in a traditional training format. These are abilities that you have probably had since birth. Other characteristics includes everything from personality to your education to other credentials that you might have. We know that work analysis is important to most of the HR functions and to the legal issues that we may face in the workplace. More specifically, the data from work analysis contributes to all of these components, to creating job descriptions, designing jobs, identifying the criterion, the outcome of performance, the thing we're trying to measure, recruiting, selecting, training, evaluating jobs so that we can make sure we're paying appropriately, promoting individuals, terminating individuals, restructuring the workforce, and also performance assessment. All of these components of HR are informed by the data from work analysis and job analysis. Data from work analysis can help organizations fight a legal challenge when the analysis was focused on the essential aspects of the job. Not the aspects of the job that are done sometimes, but the high frequency, high importance job tasks. It's also helpful when we collect data from a representative sample of job incumbents. If possible, we want to collect data from as many people working in that job as possible. It also helps when we specify the qualifications at different levels within a job. In terms of management within one company, you may have 3 or 4 levels of management. The system is more legally defensible when each level has its own job description, its own set of data, and we've performed an analysis at each level. The data from work analysis can also help us justify cutoff scores for some of our tests. A cutoff score differentiates between the high performers and the low performers. Job analysis data is going to help us identify that cutoff and justify in courts. This data can also help us justify mandatory retirement ages and help us provide evidence in situations where we are exempt from certain laws, certain regulations. This is a summary of the different dimensions of data we might gather through the work analysis and job analysis processes. Types of information: we can collect information about the job and about the people doing the job. Avoid trait-based systems because they are not as legally defensible as task or person-oriented approaches. It also helps when the method of collecting data is highly standardized. There's different degrees of standardization. I will show you at the end of this lecture some of the more standardized ways of collecting information. We can focus on qualitative data, descriptions of the job. We can also focus on quantitative data, collecting rankings of the importance of tasks, the frequency that you have to use a specific skill, knowledge, or complete a task. Usually it's best to collect information about the task and the person, as well as qualitative and quantitative. So it's not a question of either or, it's a question of and both. Who do we collect information from? Job incumbents, the people who work in that job. supervisors, and also subject matter experts. There's no one best way. In fact, I would recommend collecting data using a variety of different methods. The purpose of the data and the practicality of the method should be considered. We usually have an ideal way of collecting data, and then we have a realistic way of collecting data. We have to try to find a balance between what we should do and what we can do. Work analysis methods involve human judgment, and so the results are subject to bias. These processes are more objective than simply using your brain to write down a list of 10 tasks someone does on the job. But these procedures are not without their limitations and their challenges. To collect data about a job, we might observe employees actually performing the job. We ourselves might try to perform the job so we can get a more personal, direct understanding of what that job entails. We can use interviews to ask different sources about the job. Sometimes we ask employees to keep a journal and document the type of work they do, the level of difficulty, the importance, the frequency, and then analyze these journal diary entries to collect the information. We can look at organizational records, everything from charts to training manuals to policy and procedure manuals to existing job descriptions. We can use checklists and some of the commercially available surveys that I will show you on the remaining slides. Here I have 4 examples of job analysis questionnaires that you might find useful. I won't open every single one, but if you do have a chance to check these out, I encourage you to do so. One of the most popular job analysis questionnaires is the Position Analysis Questionnaire, the PAQ. It is a standardized survey for any and all jobs. It has 187 questions and divides the data into 6 categories. The PAQ is useful for selection and compensation, but most importantly, it has been shown to be a valid legal defense in some employment discrimination cases. In other words, the PAQ already has been established in the legal system as a valid tool. The Management Position Description Questionnaire, the MPDQ, is a standardized survey made specifically for management positions. This one has 274 items in 15 sections. It is useful for hiring, training, and development, but with limited legal defensibility. This is because the questionnaire does not differentiate between different levels of management. This questionnaire assumes that all management positions are essentially the same. There are 15 sections. What if you work in a management position and your essential job functions are not covered in those 15 sections? If that is the case, this particular questionnaire would not be a valid job analysis method. The critical incident technique is not a survey or a questionnaire. It is a tool that we use to identify what high performance looks like and what low performance looks like. Using this technique, we collect information about the behaviors that high performers use and the behaviors that low performers use. In many instances, for example, high performers show up early for their shift, low performers show up late for their shift. Tardiness, that specific behavior of coming to work early, coming to work later, that behavior differentiates between high performers and low performers. The critical incident technique is the process of getting that information, of identifying the critical incidents, the critical behaviors that are essential to job performance. This technique is useful for selection, job performance, training, and development, but it is slightly more subjective than using the PAQ. The Occupational Information Network, ONET for short, is a large database of job descriptions. You can go to the website, type in just about any job title, and find a broad general job description for that position. The information that is included in this database, when you look at that job description, that information comes from real employees who have been surveyed by ONET. This organization creates these standardized job descriptions and then updates them on an annual basis using information from real people. ONET's information is useful for building job descriptions, customized job descriptions. If you are applying to a new job and you are curious about how much you should ask for or how much you should expect, ONET can provide some standardized pay information for you to use to make that decision. Take a moment to explore this website, type in any job title, the job title that you are aiming for after graduation, and learn a little bit more about that job, but also about the information that is available on ONET's website. Personality-based job analyses are a common method of collecting information about a job. They can be used to make hiring and promotion decisions. We know that the Big Five model is the most predictive of job performance. The Big Five model includes the OCEAN acronym: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, and/or emotional stability. If you are using a different model, if your personality-based test is focused on a different model, you may want to revisit it or ensure at least that you have reliability and validity data to back up the use of such instrument. Personality-based job analyses should never be the sole piece of information you use to make any employment-related decision. They can help us make decisions, but they cannot be the only source or the only method that we use. Some organizations are interested in measuring the fit between a job's requirements and applicants' qualifications. If that is the case, I recommend the Job Compatibility Questionnaire. It has 200 items on a 5-point scale and gathers a lot of information, broad information about a variety of different job performance components, everything from absenteeism to turnover to job satisfaction. The questionnaire is based on the idea that greater compatibility, a better match between the employee and the job, results in longer tenure, lower turnover. There is some evidence that it can be used to reduce turnover rates. It can also be useful for making other selection tests, customized selection tests, and redesigning jobs to enhance that fit, to make a job fit an employee as opposed to trying to find an employee to fit the job. The job characteristics model is a way of looking at job performance and its relationship with job satisfaction. I won't go into great detail about the model because the model itself is not what is relevant here. What is relevant is the survey that was developed after this model was developed, and it's called the Job Diagnostic Survey, the JDS. It can be used to help enhance the meaningfulness of work, enhance employees' responsibility for outcomes, and provide regular performance feedback. All three of these things, meaningfulness, feedback, and responsibility, these three aspects of a job are associated with job satisfaction. The Job Diagnostic Survey can help us identify weak areas and help us redesign those jobs to suit an employee. The last job analysis questionnaire that I want to bring up is the Work Design Questionnaire. I mention it because it is superior to the JDS. but the job diagnostic survey is more common, more popular. This particular survey is used to study the relationship between very specific components, variables of the job and the outcomes of a job. Very few questionnaires consider outcomes. They are more focused on the job itself. I've got 2 sample items here just to give you an idea of what the questionnaire looks like from the employee's or the applicant's perspective. As you can see, there are a variety of methods available to you to collect job analysis information. One of the reasons we have so many methods available to us is because the data from job analysis is extremely important to all the work that we do. That is it for the week 2 lecture, and I'll see you next week.